Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth. The game is very much so a mixed bag. I think the game looked great, it sounded great, the combat was really good, the stealth segments were fun, but the puzzles are, yeah, some of these puzzles are pretty vague. I've got no problem with puzzles, but I've got a real problem with a lot of the puzzles in 3D games, especially the first-person shooter puzzles of the early 2000s. A lot of them are so vague, and some of them don't really even tell you anything at all. And, you're having a good time. You've played the game for an hour or so straight, and then you come up against a puzzle you just can't figure out. And, yeah, you're just banging your head up against the wall for 30, 40 minutes until you give up and just look up the solution, and then you can continue playing the game. And just very briefly on a technical note, like a lot of older games, when you try to run this game on newer hardware, it has some problems. I never encountered any issues other than at the final area of the game. I'm not going to spoil anything, but in the final area of the game, you have a limited amount of time to do something, and I think it's got something to do with the resolution. I saw people on forums talking about how forcing the resolution to just any lower resolution, any non-widescreen resolution will fix the problem. Yeah, if you're playing on a widescreen monitor, on a widescreen resolution, for some reason you have less time than you're supposed to have, and you can't actually finish the game because of that. Apparently this issue also happens as a bug totally separate from the resolution issue. Anyway, I'm too lazy to fix it, so I'm probably never going to completely finish the game. I got 99% of the way through it. I had a great time with it, parts of it anyway, especially the combat segments, but some of these puzzles were so vague. I think I had to look up the solution to like 3 or 4 different puzzles. But that's just me. Some people will have a far easier time with the puzzles, and thus they'll have way more fun with the game. I would really recommend this game very highly to people who love puzzles, and well, that's really about it. I mean, if you love puzzles and you like first-person shooters, I would recommend it. But if you just like first-person shooters, I can't recommend it. You'll probably get hung up on some of the puzzles, and then you'll have a terrible time. So unless you really enjoy puzzles, I can't recommend this game. But if you love puzzles and you love first-person shooters, you'll probably enjoy this game quite a bit. The story was interesting. Like I said, I loved the look of the game. The soundtrack was great. The stealth segments were good. The game has a lot of tense moments where you have to do things within a short time frame, and those are really fun too. Yeah, they really did a great job on this game. I would very highly recommend it if some of the puzzles were a bit easier. I actually intended to replay this game, and I might figure out how to solve this issue with the resolution and all that. That way I can do a second playthrough. It's one of those games where upon a second playthrough you're going to have probably more fun with it, but in a different way. You know, on your first playthrough, you're going to have quite a bit of fun solving the puzzles until you come up against puzzles that you just can't solve, and then you become extremely frustrated. Or if you're just really good at solving puzzles, you'll love the game altogether. But on a second playthrough, it's just going to be a shooter and a stealth game because you already know all the solutions to the puzzles, so I mean they're just completely irrelevant at that point. And I think I would enjoy the game way more upon a second playthrough, and that's why I'll probably do one. I'll probably figure out this resolution thing and do a second playthrough of this game. Spoiler warning right here, I'm going to talk about the last puzzle of the game, just as a demonstration of how little information you get and how difficult to solve some of these puzzles are. So for the very final puzzle of the game, you have to ring this gong using an energy weapon that you get. And then you have to stand in the middle of this pool of water. But the game really gives you no indication that that's what you're supposed to do, you know, ring this gong and then stand in this pool of water. It gives you some indication that you should ring this gong, and it does give you an indication that you should stand in this pool of water. But, I mean, I just don't understand how you're supposed to put 2 and 2 together. I mean, there's no way that, I never imagined that they were connected. I never imagined that you were supposed to do them in sequence. I didn't think that, but that could just be me. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I found it very esoteric, I found it very obscure. I had to look up the solution to that puzzle. That one really stumped me. I was trying to activate the levers behind the statues on the elevated platform by shooting at them, Obviously, that did absolutely nothing. Finally, I want to touch upon the AI of the game. The enemy AI is pretty poor, actually. Like, their aim is really bad, and yeah, they just have a really tough time detecting you. Sometimes you can even just walk right up to them and shoot them 4 or 5 times before they respond. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But it's serviceable. The game is pretty difficult even in spite of the terrible AI. At least it's somewhat difficult. I won't say it's really difficult. I mean, part of the difficulty comes from the bosses. In fact, a large part of the difficulty comes from the bosses and the limited medical supplies you have. During a lot of the boss fights on your first playthrough where you don't know what to do, you're going to be burning through probably, 4 or 5 of these medical kits in one boss fight, and you could die pretty easily during these boss fights just by, not knowing what you need to do specifically to get through it. Just like with the puzzles, I'm sure on subsequent playthroughs it's completely irrelevant, Probably on the second playthrough the game would seem like an absolute joke because the AI is that bad, and once you know what to do in the boss fights, you're not going to be burning through all the medical boxes, all the first aid kits. If you're not into shooters, if you're not into puzzles, I can't recommend it. On your first playthrough, it'll probably be somewhat difficult. It might even be very difficult for you if you're terrible at shooters or you just can't find the medical boxes. But on subsequent playthroughs, the game is, I'm sure, an absolute joke. And once you already know all the puzzles, I don't see what fun you could extract from the game at that point. I mean, the element of discovery from your first playthrough is completely gone on the second playthrough. And all you have left is the shooting, which is very fun. The guns are really nice, the recoil is good, limited ammo is nice. It's not like a lot of other shooters where you can just spray and pray, and there's no recoil. Recoil actually matters in this game. Ammo conservation matters. You're not just going to mow down your enemies by firing from the hip. But like I said, the brain-dead AI makes the game a joke in terms of difficulty. Except where they just throw 20 enemies at you at once. But that doesn't happen too often, so yeah, there aren't too many truly challenging moments in terms of combat. Like I said, the real difficulty comes from trying to do the puzzles completely blind and trying to do the boss fights completely blind. But anyway, like I said, I enjoyed it. It's a good game in some ways. In other ways, it's kind of frustrating. If I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. If some of the puzzle solutions were a bit simpler and the AI was more intelligent, and the game were a bit longer, I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10.